Hi, everybody. It's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about high level design direction. This is something that the game director, creative director, whatever it's called on your project, this is probably the single most important task that the person in this role does. I'm going to talk about it, but it's also something that I think is misunderstood or underestimated by a lot of people who aren't in the role and by people who first step into the role. And what I mean by high level design direction is you basically have to watch everything going into the game. Everything. System mechanics, story elements, quests, maps, dialogue, NPCs, the names of things, lore text, everything to make sure it all fits. And that high level, whatever view, whatever, your take on your vision of this game should be, all that stuff has to fit and serve that vision. Now, this sounds almost like, well, that's very egotistical. And I get a lot of people say this. The biggest issue game directors run into when they do this is people who get mad at them for being egotistical dictators, not realizing that they're trying to serve something higher than a particular person's work. I would recommend, this video is going to have a lot of video references in it. I would recommend watching my videos on how to be a good game director. And just to be clear, you probably want to watch all my nuance videos again as well. They're listed below because I want to make clear what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about designers doing bad work and the game director has to be watching for that. I'm talking about designers doing work that doesn't fit within what you're trying to create and having to have it changed or removed. And it's really difficult to explain. And based on some comments of some videos I've done, I think a lot of people have misunderstood that that's what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to dive into both Fallout 2 and WildStar a little more. I don't really want to because I'm positive people will misunderstand me again, but I'm going to try to be really clear. And also for WildStar, a different reason, I still have some PTSD over that. I don't like thinking about it. I don't even like looking at my notes. I have some very clear notes. Like I told you, my notes from that area are the most extensive from that era. Is the most extensive I've ever taken. I don't like looking at them though. They just bring up a lot of bad memories and arguments and people angry at other people. So let's take a quick look though at Fallout 2 and at WildStar because they both illustrate what I'm trying to talk about here. So when I look at Fallout 2, my biggest problem with it isn't that I don't think it's got very good design. I think it has really good design. My problem is I see different areas of the game that do not match up tonally. And I see too much over the top pop culture referencing, fourth wall breaking humor. Now I've talked about this in my videos. You see it in my video below about why I left Fallout 2. But what I want to make clear is I'm not saying that designers on those in that game were bad designers. In fact, many of them were the designers from the first one. So I've praised them. You know they're good. So what happened in my mind? What happened with Fallout 2? I think the single biggest point of failure is that there was not a cohesive high-level design direction. Basically, the designers were allowed to do whatever they wanted in their areas. And this caused the game to not only feel different than the first one, but parts of the game feel different than other parts of the game. In fact, when you play the game, it often feels like you do one area and you do all of it, and then you're breadcrumbed onto the next area, which then is its totally new, self-contained area. And you do things there until you're breadcrumbed on to the next area. And that's probably because that's how it was done. That's how it was created. The designers were given kind of free reign over their own area, and so they did everything they wanted to do. And the only caveat was, okay, at the end of your area, push the player on to the next area of the game. Now, I've talked a lot about Fallout 1, and I've talked about stuff I had removed or changed in it. And that wasn't me trying to be a gatekeeper, although I will point out, gatekeeper is part of the duty of a game director. It's what you're being paid to do. People don't like it. People get mad at you, you egotistical dictator, you. But it's what it's what you're there to do. I talked about things I removed from Fallout 1, including the talking raccoon race, the Recree, or the Terminator-style robots. I've also talked about a character I asked to be rewritten, and Scott Benny wrote it. Scott Benny was a great narrative designer, but there was a character that he wrote that had Tourette's, that basically just every other word out of his mouth was a swear word. And I was just like, I don't think this fits. I can think of a lot of reasons this character would no longer be alive. And I asked him to rewrite it. It wasn't because the Recree or the Terminator robots or that character were bad. It's their design didn't fit the high-level vision of Fallout 1. The only thing I can imagine, if you want to pull back and say, what is this like? Imagine a book written by really good writers, but every chapter is written by a different writer. If you think for a second that that book won't need a good editor, you're wrong. And if you think that some of those really fantastic writers won't have that editor going back to them and saying, I need you to rewrite this, it might be because you say something that contradicts stuff in other chapters. It may be that the tone of your chapter doesn't fit all the other chapters. It's not that it's bad. It's you're trying to create this cohesive whole. And a really good, excellent, well-designed thing may not fit, and it has to be changed. So let me talk briefly about WildStar, despite me not wanting to, because I want you to go back and watch that video, because I've had people say, oh, I can't believe you thought those designers were bad designers, the ones who got laid off. First of all, I never said that. Second, I kind of implied the opposite, where I said that at the very beginning of the video, I worked with some of the best artists, designers, and programmers ever in my career at WildStar, and I'm including those guys. It was strange to us that they all got laid off. In fact, I didn't know that was going to happen, and it reminded me of when the original art director got laid off. I had no idea. One day, he just wasn't there anymore. You would think me as a programming director would be in that loop. I was not. What happened, just to remind everybody, is after 3 years of WildStar, the NCSoft Austin and NCSoft Seoul came to the office to look at the game. And every director had intensive questions asked of them. I spent hours with one of the top programming directors from Seoul, and he was asking me really detailed questions about the code, especially the engine. There were several times, especially when it was about graphics or networking, that I said, do you want me to go get the programmer who did that? He can answer your question in far more detail. And he'd go, no, I want you to answer. What I didn't realize then, that I realized later, was that I was being tested. I was being questioned. They wanted to know what was going on, that they'd spent 3 years and a lot of money, and the game wasn't coming together, and they wanted to know why. The conclusion they reached was the code engine looked good, the art looked good, and both of them were cohesive. In other words, the game engine had a lot of features that were planning to be used. The art all looked like it belonged in the same game. The design, not so much. So again, let me stress, this wasn't because the individual designers were bad. I believed that the direction they were getting, the vision, wasn't very coherent. Now, I expected to have the design directors to be replaced. I didn't even expect them to be let go. I mean, they were founders of Carbine. I certainly didn't think that all but one of the designers would be let go. We found that out later. I was given no insight into the process, the same as when the original art director was let go. And it was surprising, and it underscores a lot of what happened at Carbine. Things were compartmentalized. Information was compartmentalized. Probably the number one amount of feedback, and I don't like looking at the comment section of that video either, my WildStar video. But looking at it, the number one feedback I seem to get from people who also work there is they had no idea what was happening to me as design director. The same way I didn't know what was happening with the original design group. There wasn't a lot of knowledge that you got, a lot of insight you got into the other departments. And when they were let go, the first reaction I had was, do you know how much knowledge we just lost? These were designers who had an intimate knowledge of the game engine and how our tools worked. And that was a lot to be lost. It was a huge setback. But to just reiterate what I'm saying, it wasn't their fault. I think there was no high-level vision that had gelled enough to make NCSoft Austin and NCSoft Seoul happy. That isn't me. That isn't feedback from me. That was feedback from them. So I don't know exactly what prompted their decision, but that's what they decided to do. And then that made me think of Outer Worlds. A lot of what I did in that game was very high-level guidance. That's why a lot of people said, "Oh, did you do that?" No, I didn't actually do that. I didn't write those system mechanics. I didn't create the parameters for them. I didn't balance that. I didn't do that. It was very high level. I talked at one point in a video about, in playtesting the Outer Worlds, about how much I played the game. I played it like 16, 19 times. I know it was well over a dozen, with wildly different characters, because I wanted to see how it worked. I wanted to look at narrative design. I wanted to see, am I being pushed in one direction? Am I being told one path in the game is right and other ones are wrong? It's hard to tell that from reading it, but when you play it, it really comes out. I wanted to look at system mechanics. I wanted to make a build that was strong in some area. And was the game too hard with that build? Was it too easy? And I did discover that there were areas in the game, there were maps that were too hard. And I thought the map needed to be changed. Now, if the entire game had been too hard with a build, I would have wanted to change the system mechanic. It didn't mean that map was bad, and it didn't mean the mechanic was bad. It meant they didn't go together, and you have to decide what to do. Now, did I get to review everything? No. The game did ship with imbalances, especially like item imbalances and economic imbalances. But what a good design director, a good game director tries to do is look at all those things from a high level and get them fixed. That's kind of my TLDW for this video, is a good game director or design director, whatever they're called. A big chunk of what they do is this high level design direction. If you don't do it, the game suffers. And it isn't the fault of the team the team that's doing the work. They can't be expected to coordinate that work among themselves. Somebody needs to be the person who steps back and says, how does all this stuff fit together? Now, that's hard to do. It's a really hard job. And unless you've done it, I don't think you entirely understand how hard it is. No matter what decision you make, people will get mad at you. They think you're calling their work bad. You're not. You're just saying, hey, I've got all this work that's a certain tone, and yours is a completely different tone. Rather than redo 80% of the game to match you're going to redo the 20% of the game to match that. The game will be better for it. These decisions you make the game better. You are going to make some people angry. It is a very hard set of decisions to make. It's hard to figure out what is wrong. You play the game and you have to step back and go, what is wrong here? Why am I frustrated? Why am I not liking this? You may even enjoy it, and then afterwards you realize, oh shoot, I did like that, but I was really pushed in one direction, which is not one of our design pillars. So, I think that high-level design direction that the game director does is simultaneously one of the hardest things that person has to do, and at the same time, the most misunderstood part of the role. And a role that I see go awry frequently. I've seen it in my career. I've also played games, and I went, I don't think they had a cohesive vision for this game. Doesn't mean, again, the designers were bad. It meant a lot of stuff went in this game that probably shouldn't have been there. And anyway, that's what I hope that when you look at some of my older videos, especially the ones I link below, you look at it from that point of view. I'm really complaining about vision, not actual work. Hope that helps.